Thank you and welcome. My name is Michelle Borowitz. I'm part of the 2013 Frucht Organizing Committee. To start off, I would like to say that the Association of Graduate Anthropology Students and the 2013 Frucht Organizing Committee acknowledge that we are meeting on the lands in Cree and Blackfoot territory, closest to the traditional territory retained by Chief Papaseo as Papa Chase at the signing of Treaty 6, and within view of meeting grounds, hunting grounds, and trails of Nakota, Cree, Iroquois Cree, Blackfoot, and Métis. Our obligations within these lands are solemnized through Treaty 6. We recognize the descendants of Treaty 6 signatories, the local descendants of whom now live in Edmonton. And throughout the surrounding area marked by the reserves of Sampson, Ermiskin, Montana, and Louisville, and Alexander, Enoch, Hall, and Alexis, the former Papa Chase and Michelle reserves, and the settlements of Lac St. Anne and St. Albert. We are sincerely grateful to be able to hold this lecture series and student conference on these lands. So on behalf of the 2013 Frucht Organizing Committee, welcome to the 21st Annual Richard Frucht Memorial Lecture Series and the 2013 Anthropology Student Conference. Now, AGAS organizes and hosts these two annual events, which rotates between archaeology, linguistic anthropology, physical anthropology, and social cultural anthropology. These are the four fields of anthropology. Now, we invite an anthropologist as our distinguished speaker to share their research interest in a public lecture and also a department lecture. Now, the goal of the public lecture is to engage with the wider University of Alberta community and those outside of academia that our discipline offers not only critical and comparative insight into the continuities and dynamics of social change and society's development, but also that it challenges cultural assumptions. The goal of our department lecture is to exemplify the passion and the drive of Dr. Richard Frucht, whom this lecture is dedicated to. Richard Frucht challenged his students and colleagues to pursue an anthropology that involves more than detached, observed analysis and theory building, but to also actively engage in the fundamentals of anthropology. Now, this year's subfield is in social cultural anthropology with a specific focus on visual anthropology. Now, visual anthropologists use ethnographic film, photography, digital media, and visual representation to seek understanding of culture, society, and human diversity. We are honored and privileged to announce our 2013 Distinguished Frucht Speaker is Dr. Faye Ginsburg from the Department of Anthropology in New York City. Just a moment. Now, our student conference orients around each of the four anthropology subdisciplines and centers on anthropology's undergraduate and graduate students. However, it is an open conference to undergraduate and graduate students from other disciplines who are interested in participating. Now, this year's conference includes papers, posters, film submissions, and 2 Pecha Kucha presentations. Our conference is a 2-day event. It's going to be held all day tomorrow and on Friday. We have graduate and undergraduates representing several departments from the University of Alberta, including anthropology, East Asian studies, education policy studies, geography, history and classics, resource economics, and environmental sociology, secondary education, and sociology. We also have 2 anthropology undergraduates from Grant MacEwan University. Now, this conference is a free and an open event. I encourage you to not hesitate to stop by and take in our student presentations. Our student conference is located it's going to be at the Edmonton Health Clinic Academy, just on the opposite side of the University Alberta Hospital. We have a Frucht website. I encourage you to please check it out. Details are on there. Professor and Chair of the Department of Anthropology.
The one privilege the chair of the Anthropology Department has had for the last few years, ever since the Frucht Lecture Series started, is to introduce the speaker on the first evening. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Faye Ginsburg of the Department of Anthropology at New York University. It's described as one of the leading social and visual anthropologists in North America. Her anthropological research examines the relationship between culture and media. She links cross-cultural ethnography with film, television, video, and digital media in order to explore and to reflect on issues of representation, social change, and identity. Her particular areas of research interest include ethnographic film, ethnography of media, indigenous media, social movements in the U.S., and disability studies. Dr. Ginsburg completed her BA degree at Barnard College, Columbia University, and her PhD at the City University of New York. Her PhD dissertation was titled Reconstructing Gender in America, Self-Definition and Social Action Among Abortion Activists. As a David B. Kreiser Professor of Anthropology, Dr. Ginsburg directs the Graduate Certificate Program in Culture and Media, which celebrated its 25th anniversary in the fall of 2011. And she is the founding director of the Center for Media, Culture, and History. She is the founding co-director of both the Center for Religion and Media and the Council for the Study of Disability. Dr. Ginsburg publishes widely in both print academic journals and internet publications. She has a forthcoming book, Mediating Culture, Indigenous Identity in a Digital Age, with Duke University Press, that focuses on her past decade of collaborative work with Indigenous filmmakers in Australia, Canada, the US, and Brazil. Along with Lila Abu-Lugo and Brian Larkin, she's co-editor of Media World's Anthropology on New Terrain, University of California Press. She's also co-editor with Barbara Abrash on 9/11 and After, a virtual casebook, which is an internet publication that uses, quote, tactical media, unquote, to examine the intersection of digital media and cultural activism on the landscape of global politics. In 1995, Dr. Ginsburg and Dr. Raina Rapp co-edited Conceiving the New World Order, The Global Politics of Reproduction, which won the 2004 Council of Anthropology and Reproduction edited volume prize. In addition to a second edition in 1998 and a Net.Library edition in 1999, her 1989 book, Contested Lives, The Abortion Debate in an American Community, which was based on her doctoral research, has won several book awards. Dr. Ginsburg has curated and programmed films for over 25 years. In the fall of 2011, she hosted a number of Indigenous filmmakers at New York University, and in May 2009, she curated a week-long series on Indigenous media, which was recognized in 2010 by the online journal Media Race. In the 2010-11 academic year, and along with Raina Rapp, she presented lectures entitled Screening Disabilities at several academic institutions to share part of their current research on innovation and cultural understanding and the changing place of learning disabilities in American public life. Dr. Ginsburg is a longtime advisor to the annual Margaret Mead Film and Video Festival at the American Museum of Natural History and was part of its 35th anniversary planning committee in 2012. She is also an advisor to the 6-year-old Real Abilities New York Disability Film Festival, held nationally and annually in the U.S. In 2005, she co-curated First Nations First Features, a showcase of world Indigenous film and media that featured films by Indigenous directors. Her talk tonight, as you can see, is called Disabilities in the Digital Age, Rethinking the Human Imaginary on and off screen. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ginsburg.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I just like to follow up, thanks to the people who just introduced me, to especially to Michelle Horowitz. We've been really emailing pals for months now. The Frucht Memorial Lecture Committee, I'm very honored to be, I think, the 21st Memorial Lecturer. The Anthropology Graduate Students Association, and of course the Department of Anthropology, and thank you so much to Pam for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here on the other side of the continent from New York, where the weather is really terrible. Reversely, I don't expect too much to Edmonton. It reminds me a little bit of my days living in Fargo, North Dakota, where I did my initial PhD research on abortion activists. So I'm happy to be back on the prairie. And I think I was actually last here in Edmonton in 1992 very first Dream Speakers event, one of the first Indigenous film festivals in the world, I think. It's continued. And I think it was also the beginning of my embarking on research that I'll be talking about on Friday on Indigenous media. My talk today is shaped by my current work on disability, as Pam explained, and carried out in addendum to my longstanding colleague, the anthropologist Faye Ginsburg. So I will be using we in not in the royal sense, but in the direct sense of the two of us. Since 2007, we've been studying the emergence and social consequences of the category of learning disabilities in New York City. Because we're both so deeply implicated in this work as parents, activists, and researchers, we sometimes refer to our method as adventures on the Mobius strip, suggesting the impossibility on occasion of knowing if we are on the inside or the outside of the many of the situations we're studying. As you can see, it's a famous extra drawing, but you can see the video really inside the outside are constantly on the same plane. In our ethnographic field work, with families, schools, scientists, doctors, and media makers, we are learning how kinship, caretaking, the life force, and public culture are reconfigured for those involved when a child is diagnosed with a cognitive disability. As families begin to recognize their commonalities and needs with others who share their difference, a social process that in North America, we argue, is exponentially enabled by media broadly defined, we find that what we call a new kinship imaginary is emerging, expressed through a variety of themes. In the United States, as recently as the 1970s, social mores and so-called ugly laws dictated that family members with disabilities be hidden from view and stories about them silenced. For over a century, legislation had made it illegal for persons with, and I quote, unsightly or disgusting disabilities to appear in public in most American cities. And I'm sorry, I don't know the legislation in Canada. This was over the border as well. But this all laid the groundwork for the widespread acceptance of eugenics and institutionalization in the 19th and 20th centuries, as disability scholar Susan Schweik has taught us in her recent important book on this subject. And this is the cover of the book. That's a Paul Strand photograph. And just to impress upon you how recent all the changes are, those laws were on the books in certain parts of the United States up through the 1970s. Over the last few decades, the available cultural scripts regarding the public face of family life with a difference are being revised across a range of practices, from popular culture to parenting manuals to legal discourses and scientific narratives. Together, these are creating a sea change felt across multiple locations, from the intimacy of the household to the public worlds of educational policy, medical research, and most relevant to my talk today, in documentary and narrative film, as well as in digital media. The focused analysis of media that I'm presenting today, both on and off screen, is an arena of our work for which I take primary responsibility. On January 14, 2007, Amanda AGAS, who's you see here, a then 26-year-old autistic woman and a neurodiversity activist, launched her video entitled In My Language on YouTube. Has anyone ever heard of Amanda AGAS? Here we go. The night of the work was shot in her apartment in Vermont in DIY, or do-it-yourself style, typical of many user-generated video works that are shared on the YouTube platform. For some viewers, the unusual combination of sight and sound and the sense of an alternative aesthetic, which we'll see in a minute, or show the clip, suggests experimental video. Whatever the associations, In My Language offers a riveting glimpse into Ms. Bass's life, immersing the audience virtually into how she experiences the world differently from neurotypicals. She frames her work in a way that clearly anticipates and invites both autistic and non-autistic viewers. The first part shows us Ms. Bass engaged in a variety of repetitive gestures around her apartment, playing with a necklace, typing at her keyboard, sitting on her couch, moving her hand back and forth in front of a window, all to the sound of a wordless tune that she hums off camera, creating a meditative and almost mesmerizing effect. Ms. Bass, who stopped speaking verbally altogether in her early 20s, provides what she calls the translated portion of the piece, a little under 4 minutes into the video. Her spoken voice is rendered via an augmentative communication device, a Dynavox VMAX computer. When feeling well, she can type on it at the astonishing rate of 120 words a minute. Her typed words emerge into spoken speech, as well as in the yellow subtitles that you'll see, via a synthetic female voice, It sounds a bit like a dedicated British school teacher. So I'm going to take the opportunity to show you the entire, it's almost 8 minutes long, but I think it's very important to see how this gets translated, and I really want to use this as a foundational example of how much public life has changed by the access to this kind of media, kind of work people like Ms. Bags are doing. So.
The previous activist video was in our native language. Many people have assumed that when an object to speak my language, that means that each part of the video must have a particular symbolic message within it, designed for the human mind to interpret. But my language is not about designing words or even visual symbols for people to interpret. It is about being in a constant conversation with every aspect of my environment, connecting physically to all parts of my surroundings. In this part of the video, the water doesn't symbolize anything. I'm just interacting with the water. The water interacts with me. Far from being purposes, the way that I move is an ongoing response to what's around me, around me. The way that I move when responding to everything around me is described as being in a world of my own, whereas if I interact with a much more limited-centered responses, I only react to a much more limited part of my surroundings. People claim that I am opening up to true interaction with the world. They judge my existence, awareness, and for somebody on which of a tiny and limited part of the world I appear to be reacting to. The way I naturally think and respond to things looks and feels so different from standard concepts or even visualization that some people do not consider thought at all, but it is a way of thinking in its own right. However, the thinking of people like me is only taken seriously if we learn your language, no matter how we previously thought or interacted. As you heard, I can't stay wrong to what is around me.
It is all prioritized, something in your language. That's referred to as public communication.
I saw things. I listen to things. I feel things. I taste things. I look at things. It is not enough to look at this and taste and smell and feel. I have to do those to the right things, such as look at books and fail to do them to the wrong things. For unless people doubt that I am a thinking being, and since their definition of thought defines their definition of personhood so ridiculously much, they doubt that I am a real person as well. I would like to illustrate how many people, if you met me on the street, equally diagnosed. I find it very interesting that the way that failure to learn your language is seen as a deficit, but failure to learn my language is seen as so natural that people like me are officially described as mysterious and puzzling rather than anyone admitting that it is themselves who are confused, not just people or other cognitively disabled people who are inherently confusing. We are even viewed as non-communicative if we don't speak the standard language, but other people are not considered non-communicative if they are so oblivious to our own languages as to believe they don't exist. And I want you to know that this has not been intended as a borderless free show where you get to look at us our workings of the autistic mind. It is meant as a strong statement on the existence and value of many different kinds of thinking in the direction of the world, and how those you can adhere to a specific one of them determines whether you are seen as a real person, or an adult, or an intelligent person. And in the world in which those determine whether you have any rights, there are people being tortured, people dying, because they are considered non-persons, because their kind of thought is so unusual as to not be considered thought at all. Only when many shapes of personhood are recognized will justice and human rights be possible.
So I began my talk today with this particular case in this very stunning video because my language makes it so clear how interactive digital technologies can provide unanticipated and powerful platforms for those with disabilities to communicate to a broad range of publics in ways that were really not available before. This is particularly important given the findings of a recent report that counted the number of characters with disabilities on American television. Despite the fact that people with disabilities are an estimated 15% of the American population, and I'm sorry I don't have comparable statistics for Canada, they comprise only 1% of television characters, and only 0.5% of these are played by actors with disabilities. Online media offer entirely different opportunities. Blogs and YouTube, for example, enable first-person presentation of people with disabilities, such as we just saw, often using the capacities of these digital media platforms to assert an alternative sense of personhood, as does this AGAS, without requiring typical others to hire them or interpret for them. Moreover, the accessibility of media forms such as YouTube have dramatically enhanced the possibilities for forming community among those who have difficulty speaking or sustaining face-to-face face-to-face conversation. As Bags explains it, many of us have a lot of trouble with face-to-face interaction and are also extremely isolated. This is a quote from her. Like a lot of autistic people, I rarely even leave the house. A lot of us have trouble with spoken language, and so find it easier to write on the internet than to talk in person. We might not be able to meet anywhere else but online, and so that's been a lot of very good organizing. In a future video project, Amanda Bags hopes to further explore her understandings of communication, empathy, and self-reflection, extending the place where she ended this video, core elements of the human experience that are often denied to people with autism. Thus, reflexively rendering how the digital might indeed help us rethink the cultural parameters of humanity and the deeper discriminations of the social along the lines of ability. In my time I have left today, I'll discuss several other cases that illustrate how, in the early 21st century, people with disabilities and those who support them are developing emergent forms of digital media practices that enable their own self-representation in ways that slowly but surely are expanding our collective sense of personhood and tolerance. They're exemplary of the enhanced capacity of digital platforms in particular to provide self-authored sites for cultural actors who, prior to this, rarely would have had the opportunity to enter public or even counter public spheres on their own terms. In either case, inequalities in access to digital technologies raise questions regarding how the very design of digital interactivity can disable potential users who may have any of a range of impairments, from vision or hearing loss to difficulty with fine motor coordination to many other atypical circumstances of mind or body. And there's a small but very active group of people who have been lobbying Apple and other people who design different kinds of computer interfaces to make them more friendly to these varieties of embodiment. While the question of accessible design is less frequently discussed than our issues of representation on the screen, analyses of this crucial aspect of digital media demonstrates how the very materiality of particular kinds of platforms builds in assumptions about embodiment, personhood, and even citizenship. In their groundbreaking work, Digital Disability, the Social Construction of Disability in New Media, Australian scholar Gerald Goggin and the late disability activist Christopher Newell rightly remind us that questions of access in new media are caused to what my favorite teacher on the curve our digital enthusiasm. To quote them, as we interrogate our technologies, we propose that society dare to ask, whom do I count as a member of my moral community, and whom do I exclude in the everyday taken for granted technology and its uses? Whom do we disable in the scramble to the networked digital society? Or, hopefully, how can we bring about a future in which disability and its digital incarnations may unfold in new, unexpected, and fairer ways to the genuine benefit of all? End of their quote. In other words, how do lacuna in design mean that certain technologies continue to exclude some, despite the remarkable efforts of people like Amanda Bags on YouTube? The battles that were fought for ramps, elevators, braille signage, and visual signals for the hearing impaired, to name a few of the more well-known efforts of disability activists to make public space available to all citizens, are now being extended to the digital media world. The essential question that Goggin and Ellis raised for us when discussing the consequences of inaccessible digital technology, whom do I count as a member of my moral community, reminds us that issues of digital design concern more than political economy or tweaking technology. They reflect the politics of recognition and the need to extend our everyday practices to include the full range of people who constitute our body politic. My interest in this question of the impact of digital media and the experiences and categorical understandings of disability grows from several sources. First is my several decades of interest in transformations in media worlds as a form of cultural activism. For those who know my work and speak quickly with it, I consider my first book on the abortion controversy and a central focus in my long-standing work on the development of Indigenous media worldwide. Second is the 24 plus years I've spent raising a child, my daughter Sam, with a rare and debilitating Jewish genetic disorder called familial dysautonomia. The circumstance has, since her birth in 1989, profoundly changed my understanding of disability and its consequences, and it turned me into an advocate, activist, and a daily observer of the difference that media forms and representations can make in the lives of those who routinely face challenges of communication, mobility, chronic illness, and discrimination. As Sam has grown up, I observed her as she grew increasingly frustrated with the stunning lack of visibility of kids with disabilities on any of her favorite forms of popular media. In fact, she introduced me to, she created a phrase that I use often in my teaching. She goes, "That's not a disabled actor, that's a model in a wheelchair." Eventually, she managed to tell her own story on television at age 10 through a show produced by the journalist Linda Ellerby. Is she a familiar person in the North here? She's a very wonderful activist journalist. Here's a picture of her. And it showed he had produced a really fantastic kids show that, of course, has been canceled now. She's retired, called Nick News. And there's a picture of a family full of one there, and there's Linda, and there's me with that with my early 20th century classes. Later, with her godmother's help, she started a blog at age 11. She maintains to this day. It was her encounter with this form of prejudice, the sense that one's experience and body are virtually invisible and not worthy of public concern, and the growing range of media over the 10 years or so since then that attempt to intervene in that situation that have taught me where, when, and how to pay attention to these issues. Over the last 2 decades, I've watched the uneven expansion of what I call the disability media world through observing a range of practices and participating, inventing, and running events, such as this screening series on campus at NYU that I organized with the fantastic disability activist Lawrence Carter from 2007 to 2010 until he moved to the city. And he taught me how to make sure that theater space is truly accommodating, which I'll talk about in a minute. I'm also working with disability film festivals. Can't mention the Real Abilities one. Here's our latest program about to start next week. And it actually travels to many cities if people get into there in the city. And carrying out participant observation with online communities across a variety of platforms. The impact of disability on digital media is increasingly evident in the growth of digital, photographic, and video work, and of course, social media that we've just been seeing, including the interactive websites, Facebook groups, and virtual worlds, all of which have dramatically expanded the range of locations for the mediation disability to a variety of topics. New scholarship in disability studies has opened lively discussions on how such media are deeply implicated in the creation of a more inclusive sense of citizenship for non-normative social actors. Disability scholar Rosemary Garland Thompson, for example, in her 2009 book, Staring, provides a helpful discussion of what she calls visual activism, a term she deploys to describe how people with disabilities increasingly are putting themselves in the public eye, saying, "Look at me," instead of "Don't stare," a kind of reversal of older notions of etiquette. Drawing on the work of artists such as Doug Auld and his remarkable series of oil paintings called State of Grace, celebrating the humanity of burn survivors we met while teaching classes in the burn unit at St. Barnabas Hospital in New Jersey. It's a beautiful picture from the opening of that show. Arizona artist Christopher Rush's portraits of subjects with disabilities we met while running art workshops for adults with physical and cognitive disabilities provide, as he puts it, here's one of his paintings, an invitation to stare, especially as images of obviously disabled individuals. As an artist, I'm quoting him, I am encouraging viewers to confront and appreciate the unfathomed beauty and interest inherent in every human being, bar none, to quote his remarks made at the opening of his show titled Stare. Drawing on these and other works, Garland Thompson argues that these representations of people as powerful social actors stretches our shared understanding of the human variation we value and appreciate, inviting us instead to accommodate them. The radical nature of this insight and the fact that most of the work we discuss is only from the 21st century is compelling testimony to how recently these changes are occurring. And for those in the audience who are anthropologists, I just also want to point out how late our field has been in recognizing this as one of the most fundamental forms of human variation, which is turning up in archaeology and all sorts of interesting ways that we haven't necessarily accounted for. Disability scholars and filmmakers Sharon Snyder and Dave Mitchell interpret the potential for transformation that occurs via encounters with disability films. They suggest that exposure to a broad range of humanity, such as occurs in the counter-public spaces such as disability film festivals, can produce what they call aesthetic reprogramming for audiences who watch an array of works that reframe the everyday experiences of visual doxa, the term that Pierre Bourdieu uses for the taken for granted aspects of our social world. This experience in film festivals, they argue, allows audiences to vicariously experience the remarkable variety of lives with difference via documentaries as well as fictional accounts that include protagonists with disabilities ranging from autism, Down syndrome, ADD, cerebral palsy, blindness, deafness, brain injury, depression, warrior injuries, and stuttering, just to name a few subjects common to such films. And I can tell you when you're on a film festival committee for 8 years, you see everything. Mitchell and Snyder reframed the insights of cinema scholar B. Rich, who has argued that film festivals organized by for queer countertopics are dynamic sites where distinctive features of that world come into formation and arguably have been built and strengthened. Drawing on that insight, Mitchell and Snyder argued that, and I quote them now, as one of the few public spaces within which to actively fashion alternative disability identities, film festivals not only serve the important function of historical recovery, they also seek out a variety of perspectives on the meaning of disability from older and younger generations of disabled people and non-disabled allies. These festivals actively disrupt static boundaries of disability identity, even with respect to disabled people's concepts of their own collective makeup. So they originally called I took this from, how do we get all these disabilities in there? And it was describing a moment when they left this film festival with all these different people with films, and they had like so many different kinds of folks in there. They got to this restaurant, and somebody came out from the restaurant and said, how are we going to get all these disabilities in here? So it's really thinking about the range of people who are pulled together by these kinds of experiences, such as cultural experiences like film festivals, and how it starts to reframe everybody's idea about their own body. Such exposure to anything can lead potentially to an embrace of disability and all its diversity as newly evolving concepts of being disabled emerge in such studies. As an example, New York City's Real Abilities Film Festival, now in its 5th year, it's from our 3rd year, I think, with over triple the attendance from its normal year in 2008, is growing and now expanding to many cities where we have offsite, where we send a traveling festival. We screen outstanding works from all over the world. Last year's opening night film, Ocean Heaven, is a 2010, Chinese Hong Kong feature written and directed by first-time director Faye Ginsburg, pardon me for my Chinese, who based the film on her own experiences working with young people with autism. The film stars martial arts superstar Jet Li, anybody know Jet Li? In a very different role. He's fantastic in the role. In his first full dramatic appearance as a single father with terminal cancer, definitely not his martial arts persona, who is the sole caretaker of his autistic son. You see there waving that sort of typical gesture that this character has. Over the course of the film, the son learns to manage his life more or less on his own, as the whole community emerges, an unexpected community that comes together, recognizing that the father will no longer be able to care for his son. Such works are not what Snyder and Mitchell call the self-esteem awareness films, but rather show people with disabilities and their supporters as agents of their own creative dimensions and complexities. Audiences of Real Abilities are extremely diverse and include a very wide range of New Yorkers, from the temporarily able-bodied allies, such as myself, to people with a remarkable range of body differences. The kind of aesthetic reprogramming that Mitchell and Snyder discuss occurs not only because of what is on the screen, but also because of efforts made to provide a truly inclusive screening experience. For example, last year's closing night film, Wretches and Jackers, Stories from the Road, was sitting and standing room only, with the requisite off-screen adaptations for crimping the viewing space, audio description for those with visual impairments, signing and captioning for deaf audiences, a seating that allowed for at least 10 power chairs in the room and a few guide dogs, and a large percentage of people on the autism spectrum using assistive communication devices, and my personal favorite, a high tolerance for audience unruliness. Once you start to work in this way and recognize that all the people who are in that audience who normally are not people you see in the movie theaters, you start to recognize how important it is, not just about what's on screen, but the off-screen arena for viewing that needs also to be taken into consideration. So the documentary, Wretches and Jackers, wretches are what these guys call themselves. Tracy and Gray, and jailbirds are people like us who talk a lot. They are two men with autism who have limited oral speech. As young people, both face lives of isolation, and it was not even until adulthood when they each learned to communicate by typing with the help of assistive technology that their lives changed dramatically, finally providing them with a way to express their wide range of thoughts, needs, and feelings. After more than 10 years of advocating for people with autism in North America, they felt it was time to take their message global to help people with autism in other countries around the world break through the isolation that they both knew so well. Through an outreach campaign conducted by a website, Facebook, YouTube, email, and word of mouth, film spread virally across the globe through a dozens connected autism network. And I'd just like to take a moment to show you a short, this is really kind of a trailer.
I heard that you travel around the world. What is the purpose of this world tour you're doing?
To know people and disability to the brain.
What would be one thing that you want people to understand about you? So that you can whether you want to be.
I'd like to know what it means to you that I have autism.
And body that can't work what I was. And not being able to do what people know.
People all want communication.
You are, so that's our assumptions all along.
Born, blind, you, and not.
Okay, so you have the picture, right? For this year's festival, which opens next Thursday, and as part of our research, we've been working with photographer and activist Ricky Doki, who will have a show of his remarkable photos and mounted at the festival menu. Part of a project that he calls Positive Exposure. Rick left a successful career as a fashion photographer after a life-changing experience working with young people with albinism. This beautiful photo. First in New York City and then in Africa, where he used his talents to intervene in the medical imagery of young people with this and eventually a range of other genetic conditions, as he explains in the clip taken from a documentary in progress about his practice. I'm going to show that quickly.
People stare. Are we really so different and not like you that you have to stare?
For me, I want to become a doctor, so I need to get residency. That's what it's hard right now, to get residency. All I need is school. People might think, oh my God, this sort of sadder, but honestly, look at the out in my body.
Big cut, a big check for a photograph. Old-fashioned professions are diabolical. They're not a breeding ground for people with hearts or souls.
Look at the camera thinking, I think I have to be here. This is not what I want to be doing.
I have never doubted the power of photograph as an impact to have in someone's life. We are not ghost-like, we are just human beings.
But I can assure you that no one has ever walked in without difference looking like this. Look at a carrier approval black mark. beyond the disease.
Nothing static will ever be beautiful, almost boring and uninteresting.
I've given up on the idea of a fashion magazine running photographs of race. And I hope I'm wrong.
Nobody jumped on board. People were still looking at this as enough. You don't understand this human mood.
It was the first time I had somebody tell me how beautiful he was. He took pictures of him the way I saw him. Not the way everybody else saw him, but the way I saw him.
Often when I photograph someone at their first, somebody will come and see the photographs and say, we're going to capture their inner beauty. I'm like, fuck inner beauty, these kids are gorgeous.
So, anyway, that's my, I would like to go call beauty thing. Pass that on to Rick. So, like Rick, the later, this is a great line. The later photographer Dan P. is exemplary of what we're finding frequently in our work. With people like Rick and people like Dan, what we call accidental activists. Dan's son Samuel was born with cerebral palsy and, in his parents' words, brought the disability rights movement into our home. Both of Samuel's parents soon found themselves acting on behalf of their son, in particular around his education in their New Hampshire town, as they sought inclusive settings for him that combined children with and without disabilities in the same classroom. This is a big struggle for almost all families in the U.S. Dan began photographing their journey, and soon a documentary film was in progress called Including Samuel, which was completed in 2009. Dan extended the questions that he had for his son's unpredictable future to 4 other students with a range of disabilities, all at different life stages, to ask questions about the possibilities and limits of inclusive education from kindergarten to college. Since its completion, Including Samuel has streamed across the country and been widely publicized both for its compelling story and also for its visionary as well as practical advocacy carried out both on and offline. The accompanying website, the Including Samuel Project, extends the film's reach through social media applications and projects like streaming toolkits, so people can do screenings in their living rooms and invite small groups to talk. The site also invites fellow travelers to upload their own stories of disability, exclusion, and inclusion, and success and failure, thus creating a kind of alternative virtual community focused on issues of education. A high school using this outreach developed an initiative called I Am Norm, that called attention to the arbitrariness of ideas of normalcy in their school. And these were stickers that they put up all over the place in the school. This story is exemplary of a recurring phenomenon that we see in our research. Like many parents of cognitively atypical children, the Habibs are not only rethinking the intimate world of kinship from the point of view of their experiences raising a child with a disability. They're also taking their insights beyond their home into their community, and thanks to the capacities of media across the globe. The circulatory reach of media is a key factor in the creation of such projects, producing what we call mediated kinship. There's 2 recent remarkable examples, and I promised I'd get a Canadian here. Canadian writer Ian Brown's brilliant 2009 book, The Boy in the Moon, A Father's Search for His Disabled Son. How many people know this book? Yeah, it's a really fantastic book. A memoir of his life with his son Walker, who has rare and debilitating genetic syndrome. And most recently, New Yorker Andy Solomon's 2012 landmark book based on his decades study of families who have children unlike themselves, hence the title Far from the Tree. Parents, children, and a search for identity. It's got a huge press in the U.S. and it's traveling around here. He kind of works like an anthropologist. He just, he puts a few categories together that I think don't quite make sense. But a lot of it is parents of children with autism, short-staffed people, a whole bunch of different disabilities. And he has 2 chapters, one's on like kids who became murderers. And there's a couple of just don't quite fit, but anyway, an excellent book nonetheless. These are just examples of many states that are emerging as neighboring and sometimes overlapping field to the formal and institutionalized discourse of disability rights, Mediation offers a critique of normative North American family life that's embedded within everyday cultural practices across many genres, documentaries, talk shows, online disability support groups, and books such as these. A common theme is an implicit rejection of the pressure to produce perfect families. Instead, making the case for the incorporation of difference under the sign of love and intimacy in the domain of kinship relations. We suggest that these mediated spaces of public intimacy are crucial for building a social fund of knowledge more inclusive of the fact of disability. In other words, once these books are out and people start reading them, there starts to be an awareness that you are not alone, that there are many people out there like you. These insights start to travel. These become the basis for the formation of groups, and I would say over and over again, you see this kind of accidental activism emerging, partly because people need to constantly be advocates. Such media practices can provide a counter-discourse to the stratification of families that for so long has marginalized those with disabilities. So, for example, when I started this work and I thought about my own childhood in Chicago, I did not remember a single person with a disability in my big public grammar school. And when I asked my parents about it, they said, oh, yes, well, every single one of the people on the block that had a disabled child was told to institutionalize that child. And that's really where things have changed. It's not only the acceptance of difference within families, but also the embrace of relatedness that such models of inclusion present to the body politic. As groups of people with similar diagnoses, autism, Down syndrome, attention deficit disorder, to name a few, begin to recognize each other through these practices, their emergent sense of kinship and identity makes these spaces potentially radical in their implications for an expanded understanding of personhood. As sites of both information as well as free play and imagination, these cultural forms are helping to create a more inclusive social landscape. Such forms of relatedness are not necessarily genealogical or familial, although they could be. They may be based on relationships created among avatars on Second Life, whose experiences are enriched by the virtual possibilities for social connection denied to the disabled in RL or real life. In any tradition, there are many, many ways to materialize a sense of relatedness, as anthropologists know. A variety of media practices, from analog photographs to websites, can increasingly be understood as forms beyond blood, which is the usual signifier of kinship in our culture, and other bodily substances identified with kinship that can create community among those with disabilities and their supporters. So I'd like to return to Gas's video. It's only one of many that she's made, and it is exemplary of this kind of mediation. Perhaps because YouTube was relatively young as a medium in 2007 when she first uploaded it in my language, and possibly because of the novelty of Gas's video as an intervention into the presumptions of typicality exhibited by most others on YouTube, and certainly due to the rising interest in the nature and diagnosis of autism spectrum disorders in the early 21st centuries. In my language, provoked considerable response and some controversy, with over 300,000 views in the first 3 weeks of its posting, which in the early days of YouTube was phenomenal. Within a month of its launch, CNN ran a story on Amanda Gass's video. 2 days later, she guest blogged with Anderson Cooper, the well-known American CNN television journalist. I think his name's familiar. I don't know if the across the board, right? A year later, she was the subject of an article in Wired magazine entitled "The Truth About Autism: Scientists Reconsider What They Think They Know." In April of the same year, CNN celebrity medical expert and neurosurgeon Dr. Sanjay Gupta visited and interviewed Ms. Gass in her Vermont home. Reflexively chronicling the transformation in his own understanding of the personhood of Gass and people like her, whose humanity he clearly had not recognized in the past, he explained that, quote, when he first came across Amanda on YouTube, her appearance there was so startling that I wanted to meet her. I just had so many questions. After Gupta met her and saw the remarkable access that was open to her by media platforms such as YouTube and blogging, he quit. This is a sort of mixed bag quote. The internet is like a get out of jail for free card for a new world of people with autism. On the internet, Amanda can get beyond these expectations and can move at her own pace and live life on her own terms. Ms. Gass's use of digital platforms illustrates the striking benefit that this kind of technology holds potentially for certain groups of people with disabilities, especially those with autism and related communicative This is due in large measure to the capacity of such media to reach beyond the local and constitute networks organized along other modes of recognition rendered intimate or at least available because of the rapid and democratizing, if uneven, spread of social media. A number of researchers have pointed out that there are features of the internet that make it especially appropriate for those who can be easily overwhelmed by too many simultaneous channels of communication that govern face-to-face communication, such as body language and facial expression. People like Amanda Gass, who present to neurotypicals as if they have no language because they don't speak, are indeed able to communicate. I think that's just the fundamental message of her, of the little clip we saw. And she really can be strikingly articulate through keyboard and the once controversial augmented communication technologies that she uses. And most recently via interactive tablet technologies such as the iPad, which Apple has now started to tailor, especially for use for families with kids with autism. And I don't know what we think of that. I think the motive is primarily financial, but that's okay. It's a big market. As Ms. Gass remarked regarding her own situation, not being able to talk doesn't mean that you don't have anything to say. The 30 or more videos that she has posted on YouTube showing her everyday activities are testimony to that. They range from angry manifestos against the inhumanity shown to those with disabilities throughout history, or other forms of unacceptable difference, such as being a person, to the raw yet revelatory video, How to Boil Water the Easy Way. In that piece, the viewer sees her first sitting on her couch, figuring out how to get to her kitchen, then standing in her kitchen opening cupboards, the microwave and refrigerator, coping with the range of cues presented by all her gadgets, until she figures out which ones will help her to actually accomplish her task of heating water. The piece is introduced with a series of title cards that guide the viewer. This is meant to explain why it takes me 5 hours or longer to boil water sometimes. This is a short version of what goes on. Feel free to laugh as long as it's not to make yourself feel superior or something. But even though it can be funny, be aware this is a serious and real situation for a lot of autistic people, among others. An unscientific reading of many of the responses to this particular video in the uploaded comments section, out of 30,000 responses, there are only 20 dislikes, gives a sense of how this digital self-presentation strikes viewers. The comments of Suzanne, mother of an autistic 3, almost 4-year-old, express the sentiments of many. You are amazing, smiley face, brilliant video, and thank you for the videos you produce. Sincerely, Suzanne. P.S. I'd like to give you a cyber hug, and maybe I can meet up with you someday in Second Life and give you a hug there. Suzanne is really aware that in addition to the use of video platforms such as YouTube and blogging, Amanda Gass is an avid participant in the virtual immersive community of Second Life. People familiar with Second Life? Here? There she's created an avatar who looks and acts like her, typing and rocking back and forth, but who can fly to different destinations and attend autism meetings with far less anxiety than she can in real life. Some argue that autistics like Gass are now leading a nascent civil rights movement, as she puts it. I remember in 1999 seeing a number of gay pride websites. I envied how many there were in which there was something like that for autism, and now there is, and the message is, we're here, we're weird, get used to it. She's very good. So as next creative and interventionist uses of YouTube, blogging, and Second Life are, I suggest, mnemonic of a broader change in the zeitgeist, at least in the first world, for those who have access to computers and arguably in many other locations. The rise of the global movement for disability rights since the 1980s, followed by the emergence of these enabling digital technologies for people with a wide range of disabilities, together have created a modest but nonetheless transformative effect. A historical moment when various interests within a field converge in ways that lead to a paradigm shift. The emerging literature on the impact of digital media for people with disabilities suggests that these new forms of access provide distinctive possibilities for virtual sociality and self-determined recognition, a fundamental aspect of personhood. This is not a universal social fact, and problems of discrimination persist. Indeed, the case of Ms. Bags and the kind of wonder, attention, as well as skepticism that she has attracted reminds us how new this kind of digital media practice is. 30 or 40 years ago, life would have been different and much harder for Amanda. Very possibly she would have been institutionalized. As one expert on the topic opined, the internet is providing for individuals with autism what sign language did for the deaf. It allows them to interact with the world and other like-minded individuals on their own terms. In another corner of the digital media world, the virtual world of Second Life, there's a small but growing presence of participants with disabilities, particularly in the last few years. A remarkable number of avatars created by people with disabilities are able to live fully social lives in ways that are not otherwise available to them in real life. In 2008, a number of disability activists joined together to create Virtual Ability Island, a location that provides support for those with disabilities, both in Second Life, including how to gain access if one has difficulty using standard software and hardware, and in real life, counseling and support provided in ways that demonstrate the difficulty of rendering an on and offline worlds fully separable. Much as YouTube has offered an important platform for abandoned families and others, the experiences of disabled participants on Second Life suggest that participation in this virtual world offers a second chance to be part of a variety of social practices that previously might not have been available. Research on the impact of this virtual activity offline suggests that these are existentially therapeutic, to use the language of Rob Stein, who wrote a groundbreaking Washington Post article about this. Excuse me. Called Real Hope in a Virtual World, and described a number of such cases. One woman had a devastating stroke in 2003 that left her in a wheelchair with little hope of walking again. She has since regained use of her legs and has begun to reclaim her life thanks in part to, this is now from Rob Stein's article, thanks in part to encouragement she says she gets from an online virtual world where she can walk, run, and even dance. Another Second Life participant who had severe agoraphobia gained the confidence to venture outdoors after exploring the world of Second Life. Stein suggests these effects are so powerful in part because of, to quote him, the full-color, multifaceted nature of the experience that offers so much more emotional bandwidth. In his ethnography of Second Life, based on fieldwork that took place between 2004 to 2007, anthropologist Tom Bolster, people know that? Mary's gone downstairs, like the other name. It's got Second Life in the title, sorry. Anthropologist Tom Bolster talks about the consequences that actual world embodiment have for virtual participation on this online world. Second Life residents he encountered who have physical disabilities were able to expand social networks and gain an enhanced sense of agency. These included a deaf participant who liked the fact that text equalizes capacity to talk with everyone. In real life, many people are not familiar with sign language. Another Second Life resident recovering from a stroke explained that, quote, you lose your role and sense of control in real life, but in Second Life you can take the bits of you that work and forge a new one. Complaints include the difficulty of reading small fonts for those with visual impairments, the impact of seizure-inducing flashbacks for those with epilepsy, and the difficulties managing avatars to attract problems with abstract reasoning required for scripting. So those are just a few more examples of the kinds of disabling design features that don't take account of the variety of hobbies that use that kind of platform. Bolster's fieldwork ended in January 2007, 6 months before the emergence of a remarkable community of support for people with disabilities on Second Life emerged, largely due to the efforts of disability activist Alice Kruger and fellow travelers who have joined the program. This is Virtual Ability. Prior to becoming involved with Second Life, she worked part-time from home as a technical writer and editor for an education research firm for 5 years, using adaptable office equipment. As a woman with multiple sclerosis, she found it increasingly difficult to participate in the real-life community. No longer able to leave home to work, to volunteer or socialize with friends, she turned to virtual worlds to fulfill these basic human needs. And here in real life, you can see Ms. Kruger has her own appearance from her avatar, is the mother of 3 young girls with disabilities, and has also been a special education teacher. Her avatar in Second Life is named Gentle Heron and can stand and walk without the crutches that she needs. The community that Ms. Kruger, or Gentle Heron, founded with 2 other disabled friends began in June 2007 when they began thinking about how important the concept of community was for those who faced barriers to participation in the physical community in which they lived. They began asking other disabled people what their idea of community was and what they expected from being a member of such a group. From this research, they determined that people with disabilities want the same things everyone else does: companionship and friendship, especially with people who understand limitations placed on them by their conditions, And they need to learn more about their own conditions, about health and well-being, resources available to make their lives better, and they want a chance to be employed, do volunteer work, give back to the community, and they want to have fun. So they decided to explore a virtual reality setting, and they chose Second Life as the one, as they put it, to first colonize. Originally, they called their community the Heron Sanctuary because of her character or avatar, but soon realized it was frequently mistaken as an organization providing a safe place for large, blue-feathered wading birds. So within the first 8 months, the community quickly earned a reputation with the new name Virtual Ability Island as the primary group for supporting people on Second Life with real-world disabilities. Here we go. There's signage here. And it became eventually a nonprofit corporation. It's based in Colorado, where Ms. Kruger lives. Unlike most other participants with avatars in Second Life and other virtual communities that have a kind of gaming effect, those involved in virtual ability do not regard their participation on Second Life as a game. Their goal, to provide support community for people with disabilities and their fellow travelers, is a serious project that does not regard the boundary between virtual and real life as significant. That supportive environment includes making Second Life more accessible with people with different kinds of abilities and disabilities, and as I mentioned earlier, they provide all kinds of support services for people to basically, we kind of change the software, do all kinds of things to make it more work for them, regardless of what their issues are. And I would argue brings us back to this question of the making up of moral community and how design factors into that. The value we will recognize can only happen when access to a medium is taken into account. So, in conclusion, there is still considerable ground to cover before we truly achieve an ethos in which disability and its digital incarnations may unfold in new, unexpected, and fairer ways to the genuine benefit of people with disabilities, to quote God and people. My daughter, age 24, still finds it hard to find actual characters with disabilities on television or in movies. Although the Monday night ABC family television series, Frucht anybody know that? Okay, I heard of it. Has become our mutual passion. The central characters are teen girls who were, you guessed it, switched to birth. But the Disabilities to a Son is a well-produced series that one of the girls is deaf, both on and off screen. Her character's name is Daphne. As a result, by the third season, which is where we're now, almost everyone assigns the camera work has changed completely so that it's often just focusing on hands and it has text along the bottom. There are at least as many actual deaf actors in the cast as those who are hearing, and deaf culture has become a central plot element. Sam and I are busy learning sign language on their completely accessible website, and we have a pact to learn 5 new signs every week. So all this suggests that sea change is occurring from the expanded sense of experience and personhood that Amanda Baggs was able to create for audiences across the globe through her breakthrough YouTube videos and blog entries, to the visionary expansion of Second Life's accessibility by Alice Kruger and her quest to use digital media to create an alternative support system for those with disabilities of all sorts, to the mobilizing capacity of social networks on and offline through disability cultural activists such as Ruth Godoy and Dan Lee, to the eruption into popular culture that Switched at Birth represents. These cases help us see how the capacities of digital media enable significant interventions in our everyday understandings of what it means to be human for all of us, and especially for the estimated 15% or more of the world's population that live with disabilities, a category that any one of us might join in a heartbeat. Thank you. And that's Obama doing. Yeah.